Esther doubted it. Lizzie had been to countless dentists, none of whom could find anything wrong with the way the dentures fit. He's actually quite handsome. Esther felt herself blushing, surprised at herself for verbalizing the thought. Lizzie ignored the comment, her finger pointed at Esther again, and wagged it fiercely while drawing her eyebrows into a frown. And that's another thing. Stoltzfus is an Amish name. Why does an English doctor have an Amish name? Esther shrugged. I have no idea. On his rental application, he provided plenty of good references, and he appeared to be a respected member of this community until he retired 10 years ago. When did you become so suspicious of people? You've never behaved like this in the past. We've never had a stranger rent the cottage. It's always been locals, even after Gus died. The same thing with the other house that's unoccupied at the moment. We've always known the folks renting it. She scratched her jaw. And what has the dentist been doing for the last 10 years? Lizzie lowered her arm but raised her chin. Esther rubbed her eyes, buying a little time to think of something to pacify her sister's concerns. Lizzie, we run a bed and breakfast inn. We have strangers in and out all the time, and we've never had a problem we couldn't handle. It's none of our business why Dr. Stoltzfus is here. He paid for all 6 months in advance. If you want to know more about him, then you need to march over there and introduce yourself. Huh. Lizzie kept her chin up as she pounded her way to the kitchen, shaking the wood floor with all 95 pounds of her tiny frame. Esther slowly lifted her much larger and wider self to a standing position, stretching her arms above her head before she made her way to the fireplace to add another log. Then she stepped into a pair of slippers nearby. Life at the inn was casual this week since they had no tenants, but they would have a houseful coming on Friday. She stopped at the window, briefly peered at the other house they often rented on the property, currently unoccupied, then set her eyes on the small cottage. Lizzie was right that their new houseguest had stayed mostly to himself, but Esther thought of that as a bonus. The man didn't complain about anything, and he had paid up front. What had caught her off guard was the man's looks. He had been extremely charming, well-dressed in English clothes, and very handsome with a full head of gray hair and a clean-shaven face. He didn't look like he was in his mid-70s, which Esther had estimated him to be based on his rental application and work history. Lizzie had a mouthful of chocolate chip cookie when Esther walked into the kitchen. How is that you can eat a dozen of those, not gain a pound, and your glucose is never high? Esther sighed as she sat across from her sister at the table. My blood sugar goes up if I even look at cookies or other sweets. Esther was only 2 years older than Lizzie, and it seemed unfair that Esther couldn't indulge without consequences. She'd tried losing weight and ate the right foods, most of the time, but her diabetes remained. I baked you some sugar-free cookies, Lizzie said through a mouthful as she pointed to a cookie jar on the counter. As Lizzie had grown increasingly unfond of cooking and baking, Esther appreciated her sister's efforts. Donkey for that. But you know they don't taste the same. She decided to throw caution to the wind and reached for one of the smaller normal cookies on the platter. After a dainty bite, savoring the flavor, she said, Don't forget, we have 6 women coming Friday afternoon. Lizzie nodded as she snatched another cookie. Yeah, I know. The cleaning service will be here tomorrow to remake the beds and tidy up the rooms. I've already checked the inventory for food. We're set. Esther and Lizzie had hired unwed Amish girls to help with the Peony Inn in the past, but most of the young women in their small Montgomery, Indiana community had married. They'd hired an English cleaning service last year when help became too hard to find. Esther could barely get up and down the stairs these days. Lizzie often took them 2 at a time on the way up and back down again. Still, although Esther and her sister didn't always agree on things, they'd agreed it was too big a house for them to handle on their own. Lizzie was spunky, but she tired the same way Esther did. It just took her longer. Esther plopped the last bit of cookie into her mouth. Maybe I should invite our new tenant here for a meal, since you are caught up in ghostly nonsense and choose not to go meet him at the cottage. You can call it ghostly nonsense or whatever you like. Things fall off shelves when I'm there. The battery-operated can opener comes on whenever it feels like it. And the place smells weird. Knowing Lizzie really did believe Gus was haunting her, Esther stifled a gut-busting